Okay, welcome back to Straight Talk, and joining us in the studio this afternoon we have Jeffrey Daibo, Trina Daibo, and of course Ross has returned to discuss in this segment the election law and some of the processes that they were going to be going through in regards to amendments to that law and different points in regards to the election law in Kahnawake. So does anybody want to start?
Well, it's not specifically in relation to the election law, only recommendations with regard to amendments to the law, and then the process that's gonna ensue in the coming months. Mm-hmm. So there was a couple of recommendations that were submitted to OCC and specifically the ILC See at the time. One was from Lori Jacobs, and then another came from Alana's office, the executive director, proposing certain amendments be made to the election regulations, or law as it's called. At that time, when Lori submitted hers, the ILCC process was still interim and it was not formally implemented yet in the community. It has been since. On behalf of OCC, I was identified as the lead person in regards to that process. Right. So that's why I'm here. Trina's here because she's giving support within OCC to the project or to the file. Okay. So we're primarily here just because we went through the LCC process, and as the law comes in, it has to go through a categorization. The electoral law was categorized as a type 1, which basically means it affects everybody. So in preparation now for going into the process, we had to compile all the information, do the research, put together an information package, a communications strategy and process for the community, which is what this is going to do now to start it off. We went to LCC and confirmed that we're ready now to go. So we basically, so they're on board and they announced to the community that this is what's happening. And that's their responsibility as far as the process. Ours is the content. Okay. So what we're doing here is just as part of our communication strategy, it's just to talk about some of the things that we plan on doing in order to provide information to the community, which is all we're doing. We're not developing recommendations, we're not changing anything, we're just providing information to the community. On
the actual process that any recommendations would go through?
No, not the process portion of it is the LCC's responsibility, not ours. We're responsible for the content, and my role primarily is to bring the electoral law through the process, the CDMP process. But our communications strategy here now is just because we have to meet with the community and provide them information with regard to the proposed amendments, any history in regards to the election law, and I mean, if there's process questions, we could answer some of it, but I mean, ideally they should go to the LCC.
Okay, so how is that what's the first step? Or the next step? You've already done all the research and all that. What do you do next?
Well, we started, I mean, as far as in our meeting with LCC, the next step was to implement our communications with the community. So they were on the radio last week. I was supposed to be there, but I couldn't make it. And then there's this show here to talk about it. So as much of the media outlets as possible in order to talk about what we're doing and how we plan to go about it. So we put together an outline of the different activities we're going to do. Friday, there's going to be a couple of people over at the kiosk at the bank.
Not this Friday, November 4th.
Okay, so November 4th. Coming in the next few weeks is going to be community sessions that are going to be scheduled in different areas in order for people to come and see the information we have, become aware of the electoral law and specifically with regard to recommended changes. And at that time, they can talk about their opinion or their perspectives. They can provide us with more recommendations. We'll record everything. So that way, when we do get into the CDMP, whenever that's going to be, we're going to come in there with a full report of everything that occurred during this. It's not a consultation phase, it's an information dissemination phase is what we're involved in right now.
Okay, so what you're disseminating then is the law as it is, and the recommendations that have been made so far?
Yeah, and that's it.
And that's it for now. Okay.
Well, there's also another piece also, because as part of our research, we compiled very brief documented history about the election law and the elections in Ganawage. We only went back as far as 1952 because that was the first time Ganawage was put under the Indian Act as far as elections were concerned. Previous to that, we weren't. So it's just a little bit, again, it's just similar to what you have there. It's just a chronological chart as far as the elections and how it developed. So people will understand that it was only, I think, in the mid to late 80s when Ganawage actually started talking about its own electoral regulations or law. And then as a result, in 1992, there was a ministerial order removing Ganawage from the confines of the Indian Act for the purposes of elections.
So since 1992, we've been basically going under this law.
On our own law.
On our own law, yes.
So we don't have to ask the minister for anything. We don't have to send him anything.
I just want to add that we do have a working group that participates with Jeff and myself, and that's Lori Jacobs, Angus L. Montour, and Darlene Alfred, who are all past electoral officers who are going to be on hand to help the community understand the difficulties that they've anticipated on election day. And a lot of those recommendations came from past electoral officers. So every time there's an MCK election, there's a report provided to the council, executive office at the time, Alana. And those recommendations are all part of this. We extracted all the recommendations from those reports going back into 2000 and
So all the challenges that they faced and all the questions, because I guess a lot of stuff is like open-ended and some things are not necessarily very clear, and I think a lot of that has to be defined.
There's a lot of process recommendations, right down to better lighting on election day, and then there's big structure changes that go to what sort of criteria to hold office. Is it membership? Is it 50%? Is it is it to follow the membership law? Those are, the bigger ones. There's like a few major ones, and then there's a lot of them are just process recommendations.
Okay.
I noticed one was interesting, just social even, which it was what caught my eye was, and I don't know how that's going to be feasible, but to say to enact a bylaw in the community that would prevent the sale of alcohol during the election hours. On the consumption thing, which I'm not opposed to, but I found it was it was an interesting thing in terms of some of the other things that were made. So this really, it's actually initially you mentioned a couple, but this is actually a 6-page starting point in terms of recommendations. So in other words, if somebody was to go to the community, the decision-making process with a proposed amendment, would say, because right now we were talking about in the previous segment about the disciplinary measures policy, it not being directly a part of this law, it could in fact be recommended that it become part of the election law, could it not?
The disciplinary measures.
Yeah.
They may already be part of the law because the law itself does reference different things, specifically that document. So it may already be included as far as maybe because if this one is a law, those might be the first part of the regulations.
One of the things that could open up is what part the community would have to play in that, and the structure of that thing. Within the confines of this discussion, I could see that happening.
Yeah. Well, once we get into the CDMP process, the community is going to decide what they want done. All we're doing is providing information with regard to recommendations that were made, primarily from past electoral officers. So as we move forward, we're going to provide that information to the community. When we get into the community decision-making process, the community may decide, yeah, those are good recommendations and they should form part of the overall changes that are going to be made, but they may want something more. We don't know. We'll only know once we get there.
You could go one extreme to the next. You could take this to the first hearing, and the community could say, no changes, keep the law as is, that issue. Or they can accept some, they can have discussions on a few. It's going to be all up to the community on what they want, and they're the ones that are going to provide the mandate.
So there you go.
Okay. Well, how? But I mean, okay. So how, like, as a community member, how will I be approached in terms of taking part of this?
Well, hopefully you'll pass by our kiosk on November 4th, and we'll have these packages available for you to read. There'll be a survey there, a very quick survey. I'll probably hope that you give me 2 minutes of your time to give you the package. Go home, read it. If you want to, give me a call, give Jeff a call, any of the working group members. I'll take down any of your concerns. I'm hoping that you come to an information something where you want to be informed. Community sessions, they'll be held in the evening. We have 3 scheduled, and we have 3 kiosks scheduled. So hopefully you come out, get your information, and then what happens is once you read everything, you come to the first hearing. Once we're done with the information dissemination phase, you'll come to the first hearing and be prepared to give what you think the mandate should be to the technical working group that gets put together.
Well,
But it may not happen right away.
Well,
because we're not responsible for the process. The CDMP, we're subject to their timeline and their scheduling, because like right now they're dealing with the justice. Membership already went through its information sessions with the community. We're following behind them. So whenever we get scheduled in, then they'll make the announcement as far as when the election law will be heard or discussed. But yeah, you can call us at the office. I mean, see us on the street or whatever. Let us know you're interested, and provide us with some contact information so we can follow up later on whenever these sessions get scheduled. And there may be 3 now, but depending on the turnout, we may need more sessions. So we're not limiting anything by any means. I mean, we're just, it's hard to gauge right now because the community either participates or doesn't.
And a lot of times it doesn't.
We're hoping that they will. So if we need more sessions, we'll do more sessions.
Okay. All right. Well, I mean, it's definitely interesting, and of course, we're talking about regulations in regards to the elections, which of course affects everybody in Kahnawake. But there's also a large portion of people who just, for political reasons and/or personal reasons, don't partake in this type of thing, and I'm sure you guys take that into account as well. And how would you take something like that into account?
Political preferences, we can't really. I mean, that's not part of what we're doing here. It comes down to personal choices, and yeah, in some instances, the personal choice has political motivations behind it. But all we can do is provide the information with regard to the process that we have in place right now. This is what we have. This is what we have to deal with. And if people don't participate based on their personal motivations, I mean, we can't do anything about that.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with coming, participating, and making that suggestion on how a person who doesn't vote, how could they have their say in an election, and who gets elected, appointed, or selected. That could be a recommendation.
One recommendation would be that we would take a little bit of a break right now. We'll have more interesting discussion about the proposed amendments to the Kahnawake elections law after these messages don't go away. We'll be back with more Straight Talk.